The popular girl at school got her period and stained her dress. Without a second thought, I swapped clothes with her. But when I went to buy her some pads, the cold, aloof top student who had always ignored me suddenly approached me in the aisle. "Did you find what you need? Give it to me, I'll pay." Even my sharp-tongued childhood friend, the one who loved mocking me more than anyone, looked incredibly gentle and soft in that moment. You look really pretty today." I froze in place. I actually believed my quiet kindness had finally been noticed by the people around me. Until I turned around to say thank you. The two handsome boys frowned, their expressions instantly hardening as they spoke in unison. "Why is it you?" The first to react was my childhood friend, Ryder. He was leaning lazily against the metal shelves, but the moment he realized who I was, he shoved my shoulder with a careless hand. An arrogant smirk crawled back onto his face. "What the hell? What kind of phase are you going through today, trying to wear a dress like everyone else?" Ryder let out a sharp scoff, letting his eyes wander over me with blatant amusement before laughing out loud. "Are you out of your mind? You look like you're wearing a white potato sack. What kind of trash style is this? It looks hideous. Look, if you seriously don't know how to pick out a dress, just throw on a black garbage bag next time. At least that way." He leaned down slightly, lowering his face to mine. Slowly, mockingly, he whispered, "It might actually hide the ugly." My fingers tightened around the boxes of pads and heating patches in my arms. The plastic packaging crinkled loudly in the quiet aisle. Just then, a soft chuckle floated from above. It was a quiet sound, the kind of polite laugh someone lets out when they hear a stupid joke but want to keep the conversation from dying. But to me, that soft chuckle sounded like a thunderclap. It came from Wood, the boy I had spent the last 3 months desperately trying to get to notice me. I lowered my eyes, biting my lip so hard it hurt. I forced myself not to scream at Ryder, terrified that if I lost my temper like I usually did, any tiny shred of respect Wood had for me would vanish forever. But my silence only made Ryder push harder. "Wow, look at our resident drama queen. What is wrong with you today? You're actually keeping your mouth shut." He reached out, mockingly tapping his knuckles against my forehead. "Well, you don't have a fever." His eyes drifted downward, landing on the items clutched tightly against my chest. A slow, knowing smile spread across his face. "Oh, I get it. You're on your period. I almost forgot you're actually a girl. Though, honestly, I always thought girls were supposed to look more like your deskmate to count as the real deal." I trembled with a mixture of rage and humiliation. Tears blurred my vision, turning the brightly lit store into a smear of colors. The only clear thing left was a pastel pink thermal flask suddenly thrust into my field of vision. I stared at the pale, elegant hand holding the flask. Slowly raising my head, I realized it belonged to Wood, the guy who usually treated me like I was invisible. I was too stunned to move. It took me several seconds of staring before I reached out and took the flask, my voice trembling. "Is this for me?" Wood looked down at me from his height. His eyes lingered on my red, tear-stained eyes for a fraction of a second. His throat bobbed. He looked away, his expression returning to its usual cold indifference. "Give it to Genevieve. Her cycle is coming up, and I know she gets bad cramps. Inside is." "I'll give it to her," I interrupted, my heart sinking into my stomach. I clutched the flask and ran toward the registers like a coward trying to escape a battlefield. But as I stood in line to pay, I could still hear Ryder's lazy voice echoing from the back of the store, talking to Wood. "Seriously, didn't she look ridiculous in that dress? You should have seen her when we did track together as kids. She ran like a burly lumberjack. I never thought I'd see the day Paige actually squeezed herself into a skirt." I didn't turn around to see if Wood was looking at me. But I heard his quiet, dismissive reply. "Yeah." I walked back to the classroom with my head down, feeling completely hollow. When I pushed the door open, I didn't announce my arrival with a cheerful shout like I usually did. I didn't call out, "Hey, Genevieve. I got your stuff." I just walked quietly toward my seat. As usual, Genevieve's desk was surrounded by a crowd of popular kids. They were spilled over onto my chair, completely blocking my way. I heard one of the girls ask her, "So, Genevieve, who is it going to be? Wood, the star student, or Ryder, the varsity captain?" It was a question Genevieve got asked almost every single day. She always avoided giving a straight answer. But whenever the crowd dispersed, she would hold my hand with a sweet, reassuring smile and whisper, "Don't listen to them, Paige. Wood and I just take prep classes together. We're just friends. If you like him, you should totally go for it." But today, for some reason, my feet glued themselves to the floor. I stayed back, wanting to hear what she really thought. Genevieve offered a bright, dimpled smile, her voice dripping with playful sweetness. Ugh, why do you guys have to ask such hard questions? Wood is amazing, but Ryder is so sweet too. It's impossible to choose. Someone laughed, nudging her shoulder. Just pick the one who treats you best. One of those handsome boys is going to end up heartbroken anyway. I stood frozen in the shadow of the doorway. I watched Genevieve twirl a lock of her hair around her finger, looking utterly helpless. But they both treat me so well. I mean, look at Ryder. He's so incredibly rude to Paige, and they've literally grown up together. But he's always so gentle and attentive with me. And Wood? Paige has been throwing herself at him for 3 months, and he won't even look her in the eye. But he treats me so differently. She let out a heavy, dramatic sigh, as if carrying the weight of the world on her shoulders. There's only one of me, you know? I don't want to make a reckless decision and hurt either of them. So I guess I'll just have to wait and see how they behave. The warning bell for the next class rang right on cue. Genevieve shrugged playfully, telling everyone to get back to their seats. When her eyes finally landed on me standing in the doorway, she pouted with slight irritation. What took you so long to buy some simple pads? The break is almost over, and now I don't even have time to go to the bathroom. I was actually planning to go find. That'll be $20, I said, tossing the plastic bag onto her desk. I kept my eyes fixed forward, my voice completely flat. Venmo me. She didn't notice the coldness in my voice. Assuming I had simply been rejected by Wood again, she offered a few empty, rehearsed words of comfort. I ignored her. When the final bell rang at the end of the day, she tapped my shoulder with the eraser end of her pencil. Paige, I'm going out to dinner with my parents tonight, so I won't have time to finish the history essay. The usual deal. You do mine, and I'll give you a choice. Either I convince Wood to tutor you tomorrow, or I'll give Ryder a piece of my mind so he behaves himself around you. Genevieve smiled, sliding her notebook onto my desk. Make sure you copy my handwriting carefully. The teacher almost noticed last time. I didn't reach for the notebook. Instead, I stood up, swung my backpack over my shoulder, and looked her in the eye. No. There's too much homework tonight, and I need to study. I have to stay up late to finish my own work. Genevieve snapped upright, her eyes wide with disbelief. Ryder hasn't been bothering you lately, so forget about him. But this is a private tutoring session with Wood we're talking about. Paige, don't tell me you don't like him anymore. The memory of Wood's momentary gentleness in the store flashed through my mind, leaving a dull, aching pain in my chest. But the harsh reality of why he had been gentle woke me up. Yeah, I said quietly. I walked toward the classroom door, speaking loud enough for the remaining students to hear. I don't like Wood anymore. And I don't need Ryder's fake apologies. Just as I reached the hallway, Ryder's sarcastic voice cut through the air. Wow, Paige. Look at you, talking big. Who gave you permission to act so tough? What's next? Are you going to say you're cutting ties with me? Come on, let's go. My mom made your favorite dinner tonight. Great idea, I interrupted, staring straight at him. Every word was sharp and deliberate. Cutting ties sounds perfect. Without looking at his stunned, turning pale face, I pushed past him and walked away. I didn't look at Wood once. Behind me, I heard Genevieve call out in an irritated tone, Wood. I've called your name 3 times. What are you staring at? On the walk home, I realized it had been a very long time since I had experienced such silence. Usually, my afternoons were spent either trying to find excuses to linger near Wood, or dealing with Ryder walking beside me, bickering and arguing all the way to my front door. But today, the air was peaceful. It felt as though the noisy world had shrunk, leaving only me. A thought slowly bloomed in my mind. Is it possible that my value as a person doesn't need to be validated by anyone else? The thought made my steps feel lighter. I stopped to feed a stray kitten near the alley. I helped an elderly lady pick up the oranges that had rolled out of her torn grocery bag after a passing car startled her. I even guided a visually impaired woman to the entrance of the subway station. By the time I finally reached my porch, Ryder was leaning against the railing, waiting for me. Ryder looked at the dirty white dress I was still wearing. He opened his mouth, clearly wanting to make some biting remark, but he forced himself to swallow the words. He cleared his throat, holding out a brown paper bag toward me. I got you those loaded garlic fries you love. The ones from the food truck downtown. The line was insanely long. Eat them before they get cold. The rich, savory scent of garlic and melted cheese drifted into the cool air. Ryder shoved his hands into his pockets, chewing his gum nervously, watching me out of the corner of his eye. I knew this was his way of apologizing. He was offering a bridge. Usually, I would take it, and everything would go back to normal. But this time, I didn't want to. Before I could figure out how to tell him, my phone vibrated in my pocket. It was a call from Genevieve. Her voice was bright and bubbling. Paige. Did Ryder apologize to you yet? I remained silent. She let out a dramatic, giggling sigh on the other end. Oh my God, he's so ridiculous. I casually mentioned in our group chat that I was craving those garlic fries, and he literally went and stood in that massive line to buy them. He even brought them to the restaurant where I was having dinner with my parents. I couldn't exactly take them in front of my parents, so I told him to take them to you instead. Tell me, did he look sorry? If he wasn't nice about it, let me know. I'll stop talking to him until he learns how to behave. I didn't care about her warning. Only one word stuck in my mind. Group chat? I asked, my voice flat. What group chat? Do the three of you have a chat? There was a sudden, awkward silence on the other end. Oh, oops, Genevieve muttered, her tone turning defensive. I wasn't supposed to say that. But Paige, don't be mad. Wood was the one who. It's fine, I said quietly, and hung up the phone. Before Ryder could speak, before he could offer whatever excuse he was preparing, I snatched the bag of fries from his hands and threw them directly into the trash can next to the porch. Then, I slammed the front door shut, locking it with a heavy click. The silence inside my house was heavy, but for the first time in years, it didn't feel suffocating. I stood in the middle of my room and unzipped Genevieve's white dress. It was a beautiful piece of clothing, made of soft, expensive cotton with delicate lace along the hem. But to me, it felt like a lead weight. I pulled it over my head, stepped out of it, and hung it carefully on a plastic hanger. There was a faint, stubborn smudge of dirt near the hem from when I had crouched down to help the elderly lady with her oranges. I took the dress to the bathroom, filled the sink with cold water, and added a drop of mild detergent. As I scrubbed the fabric between my fingers, I watched the water turn slightly gray. I thought about how many times I had scrubbed away the messes of the people around me. I had spent 3 years acting as Genevieve's shadow, taking her verbal crumbs of affection as if they were a feast. I had spent a lifetime letting Ryder treat me like a punching bag for his moods, believing that his honesty was just a rough form of brotherly love. And I had spent 3 months molding myself into whatever shape I thought might catch Wood's cold, brilliant eyes. The water drained. I rinsed the dress, pressed the excess moisture out with a clean towel, and hung it up to dry. It would be ready by morning. I would return it, and that would be the end of it. Outside my window, the sky turned a deep, bruised purple. I sat at my desk and opened my textbooks. Without the burden of writing 2 history essays, my evening was suddenly vast. I finished my chemistry homework in 40 minutes. I read 2 chapters of the history textbook that I had been putting off. At around 9 o'clock, my phone lit up on the desk. It was a text from Ryder. Are you seriously still mad about the fries? I told you, I went out of my way to get them. Don't be ungrateful. A minute later, another text. Fine. Whatever. If you want to throw a tantrum, go ahead. Don't expect me to walk you to school tomorrow. I didn't reply. I didn't even swipe the notifications away. I simply turned the phone face down, leaned back in my chair, and took a deep breath. The air in my room felt clean. The next morning, I woke up before my alarm. The sun was barely rising, casting long, pale shadows across my floor. I dressed in my usual uniform, a pair of straight-leg dark jeans, a plain charcoal gray sweater, and my worn-out sneakers. I didn't try to style my hair into the soft waves Genevieve had once suggested. I just pulled it back into a neat, low ponytail. I took Genevieve's dress, now perfectly dry and folded, and placed it inside a plain brown paper bag. When I stepped out of my front gate, the street was empty. Usually, Ryder would be leaning against his bike at the corner, tossing a pebble against my fence to hurry me up. Today, there was only the cool morning breeze and the sound of dry leaves scraping against the asphalt. I walked to school alone. It was peaceful. I noticed the way the morning light hit the stained glass windows of the church down the road. I noticed the smell of freshly baked bread from the bakery near the subway station. I had walked this route 1,000 times, but I had always been too busy defending myself against Ryder's sharp remarks or checking my phone to see if Wood had posted anything on his study blog to actually look at the world around me. I arrived at school 30 minutes before the first bell. The hallways were quiet, smelling of floor wax and old paper. I walked into our classroom. Only a few students were there, studying quietly. Genevieve wasn't one of them. I walked over to her desk, set the brown paper bag down on her chair, and then went to my own desk at the back of the room. I sat down, pulled out my notebook, and began to review my notes for the upcoming math quiz. About 15 minutes later, the door slid open, and the usual morning noise began to flood the room. Genevieve entered, surrounded by her small circle of friends. She was wearing a pleated plaid skirt and a soft white cardigan, looking as effortlessly radiant as ever. As she approached her desk, she noticed the paper bag. She picked it up, peered inside, and her expression shifted from curiosity to slight annoyance. She looked across the room and caught my eye. She walked over to my desk, her heels clicking softly on the linoleum. "Paige," she said, her voice carrying that sweet, slightly high-pitched tone she used when she wanted something. "You left this on my chair? But what about the essay? I checked my email this morning and you didn't send it to me." "I told you yesterday," I said, keeping my voice level and quiet. "I didn't do it." Genevieve's smile stiffened. She glanced around, realizing a few people were watching. She leaned in closer, lowering her voice. "But Paige, the teacher is going to collect them in 10 minutes. I don't have anything to hand in. You know how strict Mr. Harrison is. If I get a 0, it'll ruin my GPA for the semester." "Then you should probably write it during homeroom," I suggested. "How can I write a 3-page essay in 10 minutes? Her voice took on a sharp, defensive edge. "I thought we had an agreement. I was going to talk to Wood for you today. He actually agreed to meet at the library after school. I did that for you, Paige." I looked at her. Really looked at her. Beneath the perfectly applied blush and the pristine clothes, she looked incredibly small. She was a girl who had spent her entire life using other people as stepping stones, genuinely believing she was doing them a favor by letting them be walked on. "I don't need you to talk to Wood," I said. "And I don't need the tutoring. The dress is clean. We're even." "You're being incredibly selfish," she whispered, her eyes flashing with a rare, genuine anger. "Over a stupid joke Ryder made? He always talks like that. You know how he is. Why are you taking it out on me?" Before I could answer, the teacher walked into the room, and the bell rang. Genevieve had no choice but to return to her seat, her shoulders tense with frustration. Throughout the class, I felt a heavy, burning gaze on the side of my face. I didn't need to look to know it was Ryder. He was sitting 2 rows over, his eyes fixed on me, his jaw set in a tight, angry line. I kept my eyes on the blackboard and took my notes. By lunchtime, the rumors had already begun to circulate. In a high school, any shift in the social hierarchy is analyzed like a political coup. The fact that I hadn't walked to school with Ryder, that Genevieve had been forced to ask for an extension on her history essay, and that I was sitting alone at the far end of the cafeteria didn't go unnoticed. "Hey," a quiet voice said. I looked up from my lunchbox. It was Clara, a girl from my chemistry lab. She was a quiet, observant student who usually kept to herself. "Can I sit here?" she asked, pointing to the empty space across from me. "Sure," I said. Clara sat down, opening a small container of fruit. She didn't ask me about Genevieve, or Ryder, or Wood. Instead, she pointed to my textbook. "Are you studying for the advanced placement chemistry test next month?" "I'm thinking about it," I admitted. "I haven't registered yet, but I've been doing the practice problems." "We should study together," Clara said simply. "I'm struggling with the organic chemistry section. You're really good at balancing those equations." A strange, warm feeling bloomed in my chest. For years, my interactions with other students had been transactional. I was either the girl who did Genevieve's homework, the girl Ryder mocked to make himself look tough, or the girl who stared longingly at Wood. Nobody had ever asked to study with me just because I was good at something. "I'd like that," I said, and for the first time in days, I smiled genuinely. After lunch, I went to the school library to return some reference books. The library was always the quietest place in the school, filled with the scent of dust and old paper. I was standing by the returning bin when a tall shadow fell over me. "Paige." I froze. I knew that voice. It was cool, smooth, and entirely devoid of warmth. I turned around slowly. Wood was standing there, his school blazer perfectly pressed, his silver-rimmed glasses catching the fluorescent light. In his hand, he held a thick chemistry textbook. Yes? I said, keeping my voice as polite and distant as if I were speaking to a substitute teacher. Wood frowned slightly. It was a very subtle movement, but on his usually expressionless face, it was the equivalent of a shout. He wasn't used to me looking at him without a flush on my cheeks or a nervous, eager smile on my lips. Genevieve told me you canceled the tutoring session, he said. I did, I replied. I don't think I need it anymore. I cleared my schedule for this afternoon, Wood said, his tone carrying a hint of cold disapproval. I don't appreciate having my time wasted. I didn't ask you to clear your schedule, I pointed out, my voice calm. Genevieve was the one who made the arrangement. If your time was wasted, you should take it up with her. Wood stared at me. His dark eyes searched my face, looking for the girl who used to drop her books whenever he walked past, the girl who would turn bright red if he so much as muttered a quick, "Excuse me," in the hallway. But he found nothing. My face was a blank slate. You've changed, he said flatly. I just woke up, I replied. I turned my back on him, walked over to the librarian's desk, checked in my books, and walked out. I didn't look back to see his reaction, but as the library doors swung shut behind me, I felt a profound sense of relief. The pedestal I had built for him in my mind had finally crumbled, and he was nothing more than a boy with good grades and a cold heart. The peace didn't last. After the final bell of the day, I was packing my bag when Ryder stepped in front of my desk. He didn't have his usual lazy, arrogant posture. His shoulders were tense, and his hands were clenched into fists inside his pockets. We need to talk, he said, his voice dropping an octave. I have to go, Ryder, I said, zipping my backpack and slinging it over my shoulder. I said, we need to talk. He stepped closer, blocking the aisle between the desks. A few remaining students in the classroom stopped what they were doing and looked over. I looked up at him. Move, Ryder. What the hell is wrong with you? He burst out, his frustration finally boiling over. You've been acting like a psycho since yesterday. You threw the fries in the trash. You hung up on Genevieve. You're ignoring me in the hallways. All because of a few jokes? Since when are you so sensitive? They weren't jokes, Ryder, I said, my voice steady, though my heart was hammering against my ribs. You called me a lumberjack. You said I looked like I was wearing a garbage bag. You spent 10 minutes humiliating me in front of the boy I liked, just to make yourself feel big. I was teasing you. Ryder yelled, his face flushing red. I've always teased you. That's what we do. You never cared before. I always cared, I said, and the sheer honesty of my voice seemed to hit him like a physical blow. He flinched slightly. I just tolerated it because I thought you were my friend. I thought that beneath all the insults, you actually cared about me. But yesterday, I realized the truth. You don't care about me at all. I'm just an easy target for you. I'm the person you kick when you're having a bad day, because you know I'll always come back. That's not true, he muttered, his voice suddenly losing its aggressive edge. He looked lost, like a child who had broken his favorite toy and didn't understand why it wouldn't work anymore. It is true, I said. And I'm done. I don't want to be your target anymore. I don't want to be your friend. I pushed past him. This time, he didn't try to stop me. He stood there, surrounded by the empty desks, looking utterly defeated. As I walked down the hallway toward the exit, I felt a strange mixture of sadness and liberation. Ryder and I had been next-door neighbors since we were 5 years old. We had shared popsicles, climbed trees, and walked to school together for a decade. But a long history doesn't justify a lifetime of misery. Some bonds are meant to be broken. At the school gates, I saw Genevieve standing by a sleek black car, her mother's. She was talking to Wood, her hand resting lightly on his arm. She was smiling, but her eyes kept darting toward the school entrance. When she saw me walk out, her smile widened, and she waved. Paige. Over here, she called out. I didn't stop. I didn't even look in her direction. I adjusted the strap of my backpack and kept walking, heading toward the quiet, tree-lined street that led to my house. Paige. Her voice called out again, this time sounding confused and slightly embarrassed. I kept walking. The sound of their world faded behind me, replaced by the rustle of the wind in the trees and the steady, reassuring beat of my own footsteps. Over the next few weeks, the world didn't end. In high school, people often believe that breaking away from the popular crowd is a form of social suicide. But I quickly realized that the social circle I had been so desperate to belong to was actually incredibly small and exhausting to maintain. My days took on a new, quiet rhythm. Every morning, I walked to school alone, enjoying the fresh air and the silence. I sat with Clara during lunch, and we spent our time solving chemistry problems or talking about books we liked. Clara was quiet, but she had a dry, sharp sense of humor that made me laugh more genuinely than I ever had with Genevieve. I also started volunteering at the local community center twice a week. I helped young kids with their homework and spent time with the elderly residents, playing chess or reading the newspaper to those whose eyesight was failing. One Tuesday afternoon, I was helping an 8-year-old boy named Leo with his fractions when I looked up and saw someone standing near the entrance of the study room. It was Wood. He wasn't wearing his school uniform. He had on a simple black coat and a dark gray scarf. He stood there for a long moment, watching me patiently explain a math problem to Leo. When Leo finally understood the concept and ran off to play, I began to pack up the worksheets. Wood walked over and sat down in the small plastic chair across from me. He looked ridiculous sitting in a chair designed for a primary school student, but his expression was entirely serious. "What are you doing here?" I asked, my voice polite but cool. "My mother volunteers on the committee here," he said. "She mentioned a student from our school was helping out. I didn't expect it to be you." "Well, now you know," I said, picking up my bag. "If you'll excuse me, I have to go." "Paige, wait." I paused, looking at him. Wood looked down at his hands, his fingers tracing the edge of the wooden table. For the first time since I had known him, he looked unsure of himself. "I wanted to apologize," he said quietly. "For what?" "For what happened in the store that day," he said, looking up to meet my eyes. "And for agreeing with Ryder. It was wrong of me. I was trying to. I don't know. I was frustrated because Genevieve was constantly talking about you, and Ryder was always complaining about you, and I felt like I was being dragged into a drama I didn't want to be a part of. But that's no excuse for how I treated you." I listened to him, feeling a strange sense of detachment. A month ago, an apology from Wood would have made my heart soar. I would have forgiven him instantly, searching his face for any sign of affection. But now, looking at him, I realized something. "Thank you for the apology, Wood," I said honestly. "But I think you're only apologizing because you don't like the feeling of being the bad guy. You like being the perfect, untouchable top student. Having someone actively dislike you or ignore you ruins that image." Wood's eyes widened slightly. He opened his mouth to protest, but no words came out. "It's okay," I continued, offering him a small, polite smile. "I don't hate you. I just don't have any feelings about you at all anymore. I hope you find what you're looking for." I stood up, walked past him, and left the community center. The cool evening air hit my face, and I felt lighter than ever. I had finally stopped looking at myself through their eyes. As the weeks turned into months, the fragile dynamic between Genevieve, Ryder, and Wood began to fracture. Without me to act as the buffer, the tension between them became unbearable. Genevieve's grades began to slip. Without my essays to copy or my notes to study from, she was forced to actually do her own work. Her teachers quickly noticed the sudden drop in the quality of her assignments, and she was placed on academic probation, which meant she couldn't participate in the upcoming school festival committee, a major blow to her social standing. She tried to turn to Wood for help, but Wood, increasingly distracted and distant, refused to tutor her. Rumors began to spread that Wood had rejected her, and their perfect friendship quickly cooled into polite indifference. Meanwhile, Ryder's behavior became increasingly erratic. He started getting into fights with other members of the varsity team, and his coach benched him for 2 games due to his poor attitude. I watched all of this from a distance, feeling like a spectator watching a play. That had long ceased to interest me. One Friday afternoon, after a heavy rain, I was walking home when I heard a familiar voice behind me. Paige. I turned around. Ryder was running toward me, his hair damp from the rain, his jacket open. He looked tired. There were dark circles under his eyes, and his usual arrogant smirk was entirely gone. He stopped a few feet away, panting slightly. Can we just talk? For 5 minutes, he pleaded, his voice cracking. Please, Paige. Just 5 minutes. I looked at him. The rain was starting to fall again, small droplets catching in his eyelashes. I felt a pang of nostalgia for the boy who used to share his umbrella with me when we were 10, but the memory was quickly replaced by the image of him mocking me in the store aisle. What is there to say, Ryder? I asked. I miss you, he said, his voice raw. I miss walking to school with you. I miss talking to you. The house is so quiet, and everything is a mess. Genevieve is always complaining, and won't even look at me, and I don't care about any of them. I just want my friend back. He took a step closer, his eyes pleading. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for what I said. I was an idiot. I was jealous because you were paying so much attention to Wood, and I didn't know how to deal with it, so I lashed out. I wanted to make you look bad so you'd stop trying to impress him. I know it was stupid. Please, Paige. Just give me one more chance. I stood under my umbrella, listening to his confession. It was the most honest he had ever been in his entire life. But it was too late. Ryder, I said softly, my voice filled with a gentle pity. You didn't want to make me look bad just so I'd stop trying to impress Wood. You did it because you wanted to keep me in my place. You wanted me to be the quiet, plain girl who would always be there to validate you, no matter how badly you treated me. You didn't appreciate me until I was gone. That's not. It is, I interrupted. If I had stayed, you would have kept treating me the same way. You only value me now because you've lost me. And that's not friendship, Ryder. That's just possession. He stared at me, the rain pouring down his face, washing away any lingering trace of the arrogant boy he used to be. I can't go back to how things were, I said. I like who I am now. And I don't fit into your world anymore. I turned around and walked away, my umbrella protecting me from the rain. Behind me, I heard him call my name once, his voice heavy with a grief he had brought upon himself, but I didn't look back. The annual autumn school festival arrived on a crisp, clear Saturday. The courtyard was filled with colorful booths, the smell of fried food, and the sound of music playing from the outdoor speakers. Everyone was dressed in casual clothes, laughing and taking photos. For the first time, I wasn't running around carrying boxes of decorations for Genevieve's booth, nor was I standing in the crowd cheering for Ryder Sports demonstration. Instead, I was running the booth for the community service club alongside Clara. We had set up a small station where visitors could make their own pressed flower bookmarks, with all proceeds going to the local children's shelter. Our booth was surprisingly popular. Children and parents lined up to select colorful petals and arrange them on pieces of cardstock. You're really good with the kids, Clara remarked as she laminated a bookmark for a young girl. I like seeing them happy, I said, handing a freshly pressed bookmark to a little boy. It's simple. Paige. I looked up. Genevieve was standing on the other side of our table. She looked beautiful, as always, but there was a fragility to her appearance. Now. She was holding a paper cup of cider, looking around our busy booth with a mixture of envy and hesitation. Hi, Genevieve, I said politely. Hi, she said, her voice softer than usual. I saw your booth. It looks really nice. Thank you. Would you like to make a bookmark? I asked, gesturing to the tray of flowers. She looked at the flowers, then back at me. No, I actually wanted to say, I'm sorry for everything. I shouldn't have taken you for granted. I know I was selfish about the homework, and I shouldn't have said those things in the classroom that day. She looked genuinely remorseful. Perhaps the reality of her slipping grades and The sudden distance from Ryder and what had finally forced her to reflect on her own behavior. "Thank you, Genevieve," I said. "I appreciate the apology." She looked hopeful. "Does that mean we can be friends again? Maybe we could hang out next weekend? There's a new cafe downtown." "No," I said gently. Genevieve blinked, her hopeful expression freezing. "But..." I said I was sorry. "And I accept your apology," I explained. "But accepting an apology doesn't mean I have to welcome you back into my life. We were never really friends. Genevieve. You wanted an assistant, and I wanted validation. I've realized I don't need that anymore. I wish you the best, but I'm moving on." She stared at me for a long moment, realizing that her charm and her tears no longer had any power over me. Slowly, she nodded, her shoulders dropping in a quiet gesture of acceptance. "Okay," she whispered. "I understand." She turned and walked away, disappearing into the bustling crowd. Just as she left, I noticed Wood standing a few yards away, near a tree. He was holding a book, but his eyes were fixed on me. He had been watching our conversation. When he saw me look at him, he didn't try to approach. He simply raised his cup of cider in a silent, respectful toast, offered a small, genuine nod, and walked away. It was the most mature thing he had ever done, and I appreciated the silent acknowledgement of our closure. As the sun began to set, casting a warm, golden glow over the festival, the crowd slowly began to thin. Clara and I packed up our remaining supplies and counted the donations. We had raised more than enough to buy new books for the shelter. "That was a good day," Clara said, stretching her arms. "The best," I agreed, looking around the clearing courtyard. I saw Ryder in the distance, carrying a box of sports equipment back to the gym. He looked up and saw me, but he didn't run over or yell. He just offered a quiet, tentative wave. I waved back, not as a promise of reconciliation, but as a peaceful farewell to our childhood. We had grown up, and in the process, we had grown apart. And that was okay. "Are you ready to go?" Clara asked, slinging her bag over her shoulder. "There's a great bookstore down the street, and they have a coffee shop inside." "My treat." "I'd love that," I said. As we walked out of the school gates, leaving the echoes of the festival behind us, I looked up at the sky. The stars were just beginning to appear, shining brightly against the dark blue canvas. For a long time, I had believed that my value as a person was determined by how much I could endure for others, by how much I could make myself disappear so that someone else could shine. But as I walked down the street beside a true friend, my steps light and my heart at peace, I knew the truth. I didn't need to be noticed by the popular girl, the top student, or the childhood friend to exist. I was already whole, exactly as I was. My quiet kindness wasn't a tool to buy affection, it was a gift I gave to the world, and most importantly, a gift I finally knew how to give to myself.